It was really important that I played the game with honesty and integrity.
And the most valuable player of the tournament, Bill Russell.
We cared about each other and we respected each other.
Bill Russell jumped for joy and the Celtics dynasty was born.
I've always been comfortable with being what I am and who I am. My kids play with white kids.
This is a non-violent.
I've always had supreme confidence that comes from intelligence and knowledge, not from bravado.
Once again, the world champion.
I think the only things that I haven't been consistent with is that I've been able to recognize what is true for me.
Perhaps no one in any team sport has ever won so consistently as Bill Russell.
He played 13 years, and of those 13 years, he won 11 world championships. But not only did he win 11 world championships, he went to 12 of those championship finals. There's not one person in any sport who has accomplished what Bill Russell did. Not one person.
Russell redefined the game of basketball, revolutionizing the center position and changing the face of defensive play. What he did seemed almost magical. In addition to his 11 NBA titles as a Boston Celtic, Russell also won 2 NCAA championships at the University of San Francisco and an Olympic gold medal in Melbourne in 1956. Yet despite all these accomplishments, Russell remained distant, an enigma to so many people. In true Russell fashion, he even demanded that the retirement of his Celtic jersey, number 6, be conducted as a private ceremony, one which excluded the Boston fans. His career with the Celtics lasted from 1956 through 1969. And though he would later return to the NBA, first as a network broadcaster, and then as a coach with Seattle and Sacramento, mostly he remained out of the limelight, content and reclusive. In the spring of 1999, Russell returned to Boston, where he was honored in a public ceremony. Russell was overwhelmed by the tribute, touched by a response from the Boston fans that he had never really enjoyed during his 13 years as a Boston Celtic.
I was with Havlicek one time, and this person came up. We were going someplace, and someone said, "You a basketball player?" I said, "No." And John says, "Why do you always say you're not a basketball player?" I said, "John, that's what I do. That's not what I am."
Bill Russell, of course, was born in Louisiana in the 1930s, when the Deep South was truly the Deep South, and this was a place as God-forsaken, as politically backwards as one could possibly imagine. It was a cesspool of hatred, and hatred was being not only tolerated, but it was part of the whole environment.
My dad was definitely subjected to racial intolerance growing up in the rural South, but my grandparents, Katie and Charlie, did a fantastic job of shielding him from outside racial influences.
What my mother told me, the white people in Monroe, Louisiana were really quite mean. And so she did everything she could to keep me protected so that they didn't get a chance to do anything to me or have any negative impact on me.
Like so many blacks who left the segregated South during the 1940s, Charles and Katie Russell took their children to California in search of a better life.
From a very young age, my grandmother kept telling my father that he was going to encounter people in the world who weren't going to like him based solely on the color of his skin. And she taught him that he needed to stand up to those people in order to live life as a dignified person.
When we got an apartment in the projects, I was sitting on the steps, and these 5 boys were running by. And one of them came by and slapped me as he was running by. And my mother said, "You're gonna fight them all one at a time." So I had to fight these 5 guys. And I think I might have won 2 and lost 3. But she said, the important thing is not whether you won or lost, but the willingness to fight for yourself.
3 years after moving to Oakland, When Bill was only 12 years old, his mother passed away.
I spent some time annoyed with her for leaving. Although as a kid, I didn't know that she didn't have any control over that. And I don't know, why'd you leave me here with these people? You know, because other than my father, there was, people just were not generally overwhelmingly kind to you.
Russell's father was left to raise his two sons alone. But it was here in Oakland that Bill was introduced to the game of basketball.
I had never seen a basketball until I went to California. And then I started playing basketball, and I could not understand how I was 9 and the kids 6 could play better. They could shoot and hit the rim, and I could shoot and miss the whole outdoors.
Russell attended McClemens High School in Oakland, where he was an easily forgettable basketball player. Ironically, it was his mediocre basketball skills which earned him a scholarship to the University of San Francisco. But the all-black neighborhood of Oakland was in stark contrast to what he found across the bay at the Catholic University.
At USF in the 50s, for most of the 4 years I was there, I think there were 9 black students on the campus. But there were always one or two guys around that thought it was okay to do or say anything they wanted. And it wasn't all right. And my reputation was not that good at school because they said, you'll fight for nothing. And I wasn't gonna bother anybody. I wasn't gonna let people visit their problems on me.
The periodic harassment that Russell had to suffer on campus paled in comparison with what he had to deal with when the USF team was on the road. In the 1950s, much of America still remained segregated.
What actually happened was I left the hotel and I went to a restaurant down the street, and the proprietor asked me what I wanted. I said, this is a restaurant, isn't it? I'd like to get something to eat. He told me no, so I walked out.
In 1947, Jackie Robinson had broken the major league color barrier. In 1950, Earl Lloyd had become the first African-American to play in the NBA. But during this time, few colleges yet recruited black athletes, and for those that did, an unofficial quota system tacitly existed.
If you remember the climate in this country now, my college coach used to catch hell from the other coaches and from the administration by playing 3 black guys. I mean, we used to get, without exaggeration, buckets of hate mail every week. Especially when we went on that win streak. We won 55 straight games. We'd go in the office after a game, and it'd be just a stack of mail. 95% of it hate mail. And they called Phil everything but a child of God.
Russell continued to improve his game, especially working with his friend Casey Jones, the team's star playmaker. Jones and Russell began to study basketball theory and concepts, approaching the game as an intellectual exercise. But Coach Wolpert continued to believe that his star was defensively unsound. After all, it was basketball dogma that a defender must not leave his feet, and Russell was regularly airborne. In fact, he so dominated the inside game that the NCAA changed the rules, widening the free throw lane from 6 feet to 12.
San Francisco is one of the most spectacular California teams ever to steam into the finals.
In the spring of 1955, Bill's junior year, the USF Dons went to their first NCAA championship against LaSalle University.
So I went to him before the game. I says, Billy, boy, what do you think about this LaSalle team? You think we can give them a good tussle? He leaned back. He says, they don't have a prayer. We're going to take them out. And I mean out. The first thing he did in that game, and I'd never seen in a game before, he moved under the bucket, took the ball and smashed it in backwards and kept going. They're running over there, the coaches said, well, it didn't happen, that was a mistake. The players, he had them in shock, so that we thought we'd give them an encore. They came back again, gave it to Russell, bam, again. Geez, they were discombobulated. Then Casey Jones stole the ball for Gola, and he slammed it, so it was slam, slam, bam, and the game was over early.
Russell led USF to an easy victory. But the win would later turn bittersweet.
When I was a junior in college, we won the national championship. And for the year, we won 28 out of 29 games. And I averaged over 20 points and 20 rebounds a game for the whole season. And I was the outstanding player in the tournament. Came home and they had a big parade and everything. And every year they would have a Northern California sports banquet. And I was runner-up to another center as player of the year in Northern California. I was deeply offended by that. It was obvious that to everybody there that I thought this was a bunch of crap. They then started writing about how arrogant I was. And the other thing is, they gave me that same trophy the next year. And I threw it away. I said, people that would do things like that cannot honor me.
The following year, 1956, USF went undefeated, stretching its winning streak to a record 55 straight games, as Russell ended his college career, leading the Dons to their second straight national title.
People still didn't understand how good Russell was, though. Again, it's that business of he blocks a shot early in the game, and then everybody gets scared. And so you don't quite comprehend what he's doing out there. He's changed the game in the first 5 minutes so that even though he sweeps through these 55 games and wins 2 national championships, people were not cognizant of how great he was.
Boston may have been northern, liberal, and well-educated. The Athens of America, it proudly calls itself. But in the 50s, in terms of race, Boston was a city rife with racial conflict.
Clearly, the mid-1950s is a point at which the civil rights movement begins to take shape. Dr. Martin Luther King in Birmingham, Rosa Parks, things like this, starting to gain, widespread public attention, and the question of race is being forced on the agenda in America in a way that it had never been addressed before.
The Boston Celtics, led by the popular guard Bob Cousy, were always a contender, never a champion. The coach, Red Auerbach, knew that what the Celtics needed was an outstanding rebounder, someone who could get Cousy the ball to start the fast break. Auerbach decided that Russell could fill that role. It was a brilliant decision. But bringing a prominent black player, especially an intelligent, outspoken black player, to Boston made a lot of people uncomfortable.
Well, there was another element, of course, involved in it. The country was going through great social change at the time. And I don't think they were ready for a black athlete, let alone a world-shaking black athlete who revolutionized a game that they didn't know anything about. That's what was going on here in Boston.
The feelings against Russell were intensified. In order to obtain Russell, Auerbach had traded Ed McCauley, a popular white center, and the rights to another white rookie, Cliff Hagan.
I played the best players who could win the game for me and make the substitutions accordingly. I don't care if they're black, white, green, yellow, it don't make any difference to me, and I don't even discuss it.
I think that Red made a conscious effort to coach me, and that entails a lot of stuff. You got to remember now, I went through 3 years in college where the coach didn't think I was that good. So I get to Boston, and the very first play that I made, I blocked a shot, and the referee called goaltending. And Red jumped up and got a technical foul, arguing with the referees. I thought that was so cool. Because Red's attitude was, I can't expect these players to fight for me if I won't fight for them.
By the time the playoffs began in 1957, Russell quickly proved to the skeptics that he could fill the one void in the Celtic offense. He got them the ball. But to Auerbach's amazement, Russell also proved to be revolutionary as a defensive player. For the first time ever, the Celtics made the NBA Finals, where where they met the St. Louis Hawks.
Next up is Boston in our cavalcade, where a capacity crowd sees the NBA championship struggle between the St. Louis Hawks and the Boston Celtics.
St. Louis, the southernmost city in the NBA at that time, had been a vicious venue for Russell during the regular season. And when the final series moved to St. Louis, right away, the racial slurs began to pour down on Russell from the stands.
First game I started was in St. Louis against the Hawks. First play of the game, and there's a guy sitting about as far away as you are, and he says, "Hey, Pettit, don't get no chocolate on you." and that was the nicest thing I heard that night.
It was a series filled with tension, tied after 6 games. The 7th and deciding game was played at the Boston Garden, where, for the first time, the Boston fans, enamored more with the game of hockey than basketball, finally embraced their Celtic team.
April 13th, 1957. After 11 years, the Boston Celtics were finally in a position to win their first NBA championship.
Up until that time, Reid had never used rookies, as he said, going down the stretch. The last 3 or 4 minutes of a game, he always wanted veterans. Well, the 3 guys, Heinsohn, Ramsey, and myself, were all rookies. And I think we all played just about the most minutes.
During the end of regulation, with the Hawks ahead, Russell scored a layup to put the Celtics up by 1 point. But St. Louis now had possession with less than a minute left in the game.
St. Louis got the ball at the foul line, made 1 pass up towards the sideline, the other foul line extended. Jack Coleman, who received the pass, took 1 dribble, was going out for a layup to win the game, the championship, and everything else.
Russ ran the 90 feet. He must have done it in 4 or 5 giant strides.
And Russell blocked the shot. He went by me. I was trying to get to this guy Coleman. He went by me like the Roadrunner. I mean, phew.
He just swooped, literally like Superman, swooped, leapt up in the air, and battered that damn ball against the backboard.
The most amazing play I ever saw.
Russell's game-saving block helped set up a double overtime victory, giving the Celtics their first championship in Celtic history.
And then I remember I could see the pebbles on the ball. Alex Hannum passed the ball. It hit the backboard and bounced right into Pettitt's hand. And then trying to get it off before the clock went off, he missed it.
Bill Russell jumped for joy and the Celtics dynasty was born.
The Boston Celtics became the best team in the league virtually overnight. Russell not only led the Celtics to their first championship as a rookie, but his shot blocking revolutionized the game, sending terror through the league. His ability to grab the rebound, whirl, and fire an outlet pass to Cousy raised the Celtics' fast break to a new level and made it a work of athletic art.
Russell was this savior, all right? Red became Bill Russell's John the Baptist. He spread the word. Everybody was in love with Bob Cousy. You could see what he was doing, but Red Auerbach spread the word about Bill Russell. He helped create the image and the importance of what Russell was doing.
The Celtic reign had just begun, but the following year, the Celtics would lose against the St. Louis Hawks when an injured Russell proved to be ineffective. In 1959, with Russell back in good health, the Celtics recaptured what was rightfully theirs.
The Celtics swept the Minneapolis Lakers in 4 very ridiculously easy games in 1959. Here is what the coach of the defeated Lakers said about that series. "That's quite a twist, isn't it, having a defensive player mean the difference? We don't fear the Celtics without Russell. Take him out and we can beat them. He's the guy who whipped us psychologically. Russell has our club worrying every second. Every one of the 5 men is thinking Russell is covering him on every play. He blocks a shot, and before you know it, Boston is getting a basket, and a play by Russell has done it."
From 1959 through 1966, the Celtics did not lose a playoff series, winning 8 NBA titles in a row, a feat never accomplished by any other team in any major sport. The common denominator during those years was one: William Felton Russell. 1959, Wilt Chamberlain's entrance into the NBA began the most storied one-on-one rivalry in all of team sport. It was a constant battle of wills, testing Russell and Chamberlain's mental and physical agility. It was sportsmanship in its purest form.
The first time I saw the two of them standing beside one another, I said, poor Russell's gonna get killed. My God, I'm ready to get on my knees and pray for the man. But just as I've heard him say before, he used his mobility, he used his quickness. He was always very friendly with Wilt before the game. You know, you would have thought if you saw the two of them before a game that he was talking to his loving brother.
I cannot begin to describe to you as an opponent how good he was. But I had to show up. And so my game plan was to get him in a rhythm that he's comfortable with. Now, that may require he gets 45 points. But if we played right, he'd get 45, we'd win the game.
Slam dunk, Russell. And as I say, this is the smartest team in the history of the game.
The rivalry between Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain was the rivalry that, in essence, maintained the league. I mean, Boston won all these championships. They didn't have very much competition, so what reason is there for anyone to watch? And basketball was not that popular at this time anyway. But you had these two giants, the two best players in the game. It was very much like a bullfight or a boxing match or two gladiators, and it was certainly a transitional point in the history of the NBA.
The media portrayed the duel of the two giants as a struggle between good versus evil. Russell, the selfless team player, against Chamberlain, the greedy individual star.
The press made those guys out to be bad guys in terms of hating each other, but I think those guys liked each other, and I think they liked to play against each other, not because of the camaraderie, but because of the experience of both of them.
Chamberlain reveled in the spotlight, unlike Russell, who chose to maintain his privacy.
There were a couple times I was with him, and people would come up and call him Wilt, and thought he was Wilt. All they knew was he was a big, tall basketball player, and everybody knew Wilt still, because Chamberlain was a much more famous person than Bill Russell was. And it didn't make any difference how many times Russell won. Chamberlain was still famous.
He was the dipper. He was just a little more flamboyant, a little cooler. He hung out. He had big cars. He owned Small's Paradise. And look at Russell played in Boston, so he didn't have the same kind of, Boston had no vibe. Wilt played in Philly. He played in LA. So he had a cooler persona. And it was always kind of a class argument in a way. The flying niggas were down with Wilt a little bit more than the other brothers were. So, you know, it was like either you were a Wilt man or a Russell man. And it was hard to be both.
Not to be outdone by Chamberlain, Russell's style was just as flamboyant.
When Russell came to Washington, I went to Reid Auerbach's home because I wanted to meet him, and I never will forget the car pulling up, and this guy pulls up with a top hat, like a little derby hat on. He has a cane, and I'm in my mind saying, here's an asshole here. I said, I gotta know that this guy's crazy.
I remember Russell used to have this black suit. He wore a black suit at every playoff game. He also had a cape. I thought he was Dracula, Count Dracula or something, so we started calling him Count Russell. But anyway, I asked him, why did he wear a black suit? And he says, well, I'm like a mortician. I come to bury the players that I'm playing against. So I decided I would wear a black suit so I could be a mortician also. But that's Bill Russell. Very, very different.
As his celebrity grew, Russell was harshly criticized for being inaccessible off the court. And nothing upset or mystified fans more than Russell's refusal to do what all athletes were expected to do.
I never, ever can remember one single day that I was comfortable signing autographs, even when I was in college. And as I got older, it became increasingly impersonal. Someone could put a piece of paper in front of me and sign it, and we never even say hello to each other.
I remember one time, we were in New York. A guy came over and said, "Are you Mr. Russell, Mr. Auerbach?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Yes. I'd certainly appreciate if you would sign an autograph for my son." And he did it, and I did it. Then another guy came by and said, "Hey, you Bill Russell, sign this here." He blew up. He didn't say much. He says, "I don't sign autographs." And he turned his back to this guy because of the impertinence and the rudeness, and that's the way he was.
Bill Russell was not a person who initiated anger towards you. He was not a rude person. But if you violated him, you would know in a minute that he objected to it.
I find Bill to be very simple for me. If you go to him, stupid. If you impose, if you assume or take for granted, you're going to have a problem.
While many athletes agreed with Russell's stance, most thought it was easier to simply sign the autographs.
In the pure form, we probably shouldn't sign autographs. But he had the courage to take the criticism and not do it just because of his principle. I decided that when I said no, it wasn't a hostile act, at least to me it wasn't. So I'm not saying no to you, I'm just saying I don't do that.
I understood that Russell didn't sign autographs, but I also thought that I was in a different category, a teammate and also a friend. And so I asked Russell in the dressing room before a game, would he sign a picture, simply because I was trying to get all of the teammates, the people I had played with, their pictures and put it together in the group. And first thing he looked up and said was, "Satch, you know I don't sign autographs." I said, "Russell, I understand that you don't sign autographs for other people, but I would assume that you would sign this for me." And he said, "Satch, I don't sign autographs." So at first I thought he was joking. And then he said it a third and a fourth time, then I knew he was serious. But that was Russell. That's how strongly he felt about the subject.
The most important thing was a game of basketball, and signing autographs or what the public had to say off the court was really not that important to him. And I think this is something that, again, for many people at the time, was quite radical, because first of all, they had this attitude that black people owed them something anyway, and secondly, that an athlete of all people who was very prosperous really owed them something. And Russell said, "No, I owe you absolutely nothing."
Because Russell remained aloof and refused to make an effort to please his critics, much of the public saw him as haughty and rude.
What Bill Russell was proud. What Bill Russell was direct. What Bill Russell was a person who was not apologetic. Bill Russell did not ask for permission to be a human being, and there were many whites in our society that was not exposed to a black person who would be that way. Bill Russell wouldn't say, "Oh, please treat me like a person." He would tell you, "I am a person." But a lot of people would interpret him as being a racist because of his intelligence, because of his violation of what was traditionally called the place of where a black person should be. He was not that way.
Are you saying then that there are white people who will never accept Negro people? Is that what you mean?
Sure, and there are Negro people that will never accept white people.
The word that was usually applied was arrogant. He's arrogant. And that's the way an awful lot of people felt about Russell.
One of my father's most unique qualities is that he really does not care what other people think about him. And even if there's misinformation, he won't go out of his way to correct the misinformation. I guess he really listens to the internal voice to make his decisions about how he's going to live his life, and really doesn't feel he needs to explain anything.
Bill, when he is not on stage, as I say, to the average public, I wish people could see him then. One of the funniest men in the whole wide world.
That big laugh, and a smile, which I thought was wonderful.
But I've never seen a person in my life that can make the simple things in life as complicated as Bill Russell. Ask him, does he love his children? And listen to the answer. It's not just yes. He'll tell you about the trees, the flowers, and philosophical. Hey, Russ, I want to hear this shit. Do you love him?
And he's a thinker. And he can see. If it's there, he'll see it.
He is so bright. He fools people.
When you're talking about athletes, they are, in a sense, people set apart from the time they were 7, 8 years old, when everybody realized they had athletic prowess. They're treated like a beautiful girl. Nobody really cares what they think or anything. Yeah, or if they think. Yeah.
People, because he wouldn't sign an autograph and he was aloof and he was sort of introverted, people got the idea that he was totally arrogant and he wasn't smart. You see, he was just a big dumb guy, a big dumb athlete, and he was just the opposite.
During the 1960s, Boston was reflective of the times. The city, still largely segregated and racially tense, became a civil rights battleground. Despite his prominence, Russell was not spared the lashes of prejudice and discrimination there. Even as the Celtics championships piled up, even as he continued to bring glory to Boston, there remained many whites who still hated the idea of a black man wearing their Celtic green.
I got some hate mail in Boston. A couple of times people said that if I played in the next game, I was going to be my last day on earth or something like that. But I really was never concerned about that, because if somebody's going to send anonymous mail, they were not likely to show up.
But Russell could not escape the bigots, and he and his family were subjected to some of the most horrific racial abuse.
I knew that Bill Russell wanted to live in Reading because they threw a night for him at a country club there, and it's the first time I ever saw Russell legitimately touched by anything, where his defenses were down, and he broke down and he started crying, and he said, I want to live here the rest of my life. You people have been so great. And the next thing, he went to buy a bigger house, and they started circulating petitions. A group of people tried to buy the house so he couldn't get it. And then the break-ins in his house started.
They broke into our family home, which is just an incredible violation, and they were pretty sadistic. They broke most of my father's trophies, and they defecated in my parents' bed and sort of covered it up with perfume. And so after sort of dealing with everything they dealt with and with the police, when they finally went to go to bed, they pulled back the sheets and discovered that. So it was really pretty insulting.
He genuinely thought these people, by putting this night on in Reading, and they ended up doing the worst possible thing to this guy.
Boston was hardly the only city where racism flourished and black athletes were met with hostility.
We were going down to play in the South, and Walter Brown, the owner, had pledged that he would never embarrass any of the black players. And we played in Marion, Indiana. We pull into town, and they throw a big luncheon for us. Everybody on the Celtic team gets a key to Marion, Indiana. Wow, isn't that wonderful? So now we play the game, and we go out to find a place to eat after the game. And there's only 2 places open. And neither place would serve the black players. So at 2 o'clock in the morning, we found out where the mayor lived. And we collected all the keys, and we took cabs to the mayor's house, rang the doorbell, and gave the mayor back all the keys.
The next day, the Celtics played an exhibition against the Hawks in Lexington, Kentucky, home of the University of Kentucky, where Frank Ramsey of the Celtics and Cliff Hagan of the Hawks had starred as collegians.
Reid told us what would happen down there. He says, now, you can't eat in any restaurants down there in Lexington, but you can eat in a hotel, but you have to tell the hostess, however, that you're with the Celtics.
They seated us in the dining room, and then the lady came and said, I'm sorry, I can't serve you.
The young lady went to get the manager. The manager came over only to say that we don't serve Negroes, okay? So we just got up and left the counter.
So Russell, being the senior guy with the Celtics, decided that we should see Red Eye back. We knocked on his door, and he saw that a sense of emergency were on our faces. And he says, what's wrong? And I says, well, we can't eat in the hotel. He says, oh, yes, you can. So he gets on the phone and calls the manager. And the manager says, well, it was a mistake.
We can certainly serve him. You know, we can certainly serve the members of the St. Louis and the Southie basketball team. You know? So then Russell says, well, if we weren't on the team, we couldn't eat here. People said, well, no. They said, we were just joking. We're not on the basketball team. We just happened to be in the neighborhood passing through, and we thought we'd come in for a bite to eat. We wanted to eat with some of the Celtic guys, you know, but we're not on the team. They said, well, then we can't serve you. So then we left again. And Russ said, well, you know, can't play in a place like this. There's no reason in the world why we can stay in the hotel, we come here to play, and we can't eat in the restaurant.
And as Reid said, okay, he said, you want to go home? And Bill said, yes. Reid said, well, wouldn't it be better if you played the game and then really get some attention to this thing through the media? And Bill said, Reid, we would get more attention from the media if we didn't play.
While the black players returned to Boston, their white teammates remained behind and played against the Hawks.
It happened in Lexington, which where I went to school, and I was very embarrassed by it, but I certainly didn't blame him for leaving.
One of the St. Louis writers had written what a disgrace it was what we had done and how we had embarrassed these two fine gentlemen by not playing in the game that was honoring them and how we had embarrassed them. And that the league should fine us and possibly suspend us for being so rude. And I was thinking now, what part of this did I miss? You know?
The 60s in America was a time of social awakening. The hippie movement, free love, the Vietnam War. But in the world of sports, the 60s belonged to the Boston Celtics. At the end of the 1962 season, Russell became the first player to repeat as MVP. He pulled down almost 24 rebounds per game. The Celtics now had their fourth consecutive championship.
Cousy trying to kill off the clock with his dribbling. 2, 1, that's it! That's it! Pandemonium! Bill Russell, 30 points and 40 rebounds.
The next 2 years would not be any different for the Celtics, as they amassed a record 6 consecutive titles, 7 overall. Whether it was the lucky leprechaun, a few lucky bounces, or a strong belief in a superstitious cigar that kept the Celtics winning, Auerbach wasn't taking any chances with the one Celtic constant.
One night, we were warming up, and then Reid Auerbach called us all together, says we got to go back in to the dressing room. This has never been done before. So we go back in the dressing room, and we're sitting down, and Reid Auerbach says to Russell, go throw up. You haven't thrown up tonight. So I thought this was funny. Russell threw up before every game, but he had not thrown up that night, and so Reid Auerbach brought us all off the floor, not just Bill Russell, all of us. And so Russell goes back and he throws up. We got to listen to all that old mess, and all this kind of stuff, you know. So we go back on the court, we win the ball game. Reid Auerbach was superstitious in a way that Russell had to throw up before a game.
Starting college, we were playing in NCAA, and I got nervous, and I'd eaten a rare steak, and I went in the bathroom and threw up. And so that became part of my routine. It never bothered me. It never made me sick. Throwing up is like wiping sweat off your face. There's no more to it than that.
Before almost every season, the experts would predict the demise of the Celtics. But when Chamberlain returned from San Francisco in 1964 to play for the newly formed Philadelphia 76ers, Boston obviously had a genuine challenge.
1965, Game 7 of the Eastern Division playoffs. The Celtics were shooting for their 9th straight Eastern Division title.
Sure enough, the 76ers took the Celts to the limit.
Greer is getting ready to put the ball on a play. Goes into Chamberlain. Chamberlain turns and stops the ball.
Wilt's dunk cut the Celtics' lead to 110 to 109. Then came one of the most bizarre sequences in NBA history.
In those days, in the old Boston Garden, the basket was attached to these two long cables that were attached to the balcony. And Russell took the ball and threw the pass in and hit the guide wire.
There are 5 seconds left. Now Russell
He loses the ball off the support. Russell lost the ball off the support, and Boston is only leading by 1 point.
Greer is putting the ball on a play. He gets it out deep,
But Havlicek steals it over to Stan Jones. Havlicek stole the ball. It's all over. It's all over.
I did not trust anyone to throw that pass in but me, because I always felt that I was the best passer. It might not have been true, but I always thought that.
They immediately called timeout. And Russell's completely crazed about hitting the guide wire and the ball going back to them. We could lose the game if they make a basket.
So I go in the huddle and I say, you guys, you got to do something. You know, you got to take care of me now.
He gets it out deep,
But Havlicek steals it over to Stan Jones. Havlicek stole the ball. It's all over. It's all over. Johnny Havlicek is being mobbed by the fans. It's all over. Bill Russell wants to grab Havlicek. He hugs him. He squeezes John Havlicek.
I always tell Havlicek, listen, if I hadn't done that, you never could have been a hero.
By the mid-60s, the Black Power movement was making its presence known.
During that particular time, it was Martin Luther King, Stokely Carmichael's, and the Muslim movement was coming alive. There were all kinds of things, so it was all in the forefront.
In 1963, Martin Luther King and civil rights demonstrators were attacked by the Birmingham police. 2 months later, the NAACP's local leader, Medgar Evers, was assassinated in front of his home in Jackson, Mississippi. During the summer of '64, Medgar's brother Charles invited Russell to Mississippi to conduct basketball clinics in an effort to calm racial tensions.
Well, do you think that you will get some white kids to play basketball with Negro kids?
I think so. I don't see why not. My kids play with white kids, and nobody got hurt yet.
During these times, it was the prominent black athletes who could afford to speak out on the injustices of black people, and did so.
During the years that Bill was playing, he was one of few black athletes that those of us in the sport really truly looked up to. It was that he stood for the types of things that we needed to stand up for. We held on to the future just merely by watching and listening to the Bill Russells and the Jim Browns and those people who were outspoken.
In a show of solidarity, the leading black athletes gathered in Cleveland to meet with Muhammad Ali after he refused induction into the armed services.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Muhammad Ali has just refused to be inducted into the United States Armed Forces.
I had an organization called the Black Economic Union, and Bill Russell and Bobby Mitchell and a lot of the athletes and young MBAs from around the country dealt with that organization.
Muhammad Ali brought us together, actually, when he refused to go into the service. And the feeling among Jim Brown and Bill Russell was that the thing to do would be to bring Muhammad Ali to Cleveland, and we all sit down with him and try to find out if he is, in fact, sincere in his beliefs. At that point, we're saying that what you're really doing is you're embarrassing all the black athletes, and we need to talk to you.
Came out of friendship to Muhammad Ali. And I know that we wanted to find out from him. You know, you read the papers, you see on television and all this kind of stuff, what is going on.
And had a full-day discussion with him. And naturally, Bill put some heavy intellectual reasoning to him. But when it was all over, though, Muhammad Ali typically win arguments, and he won that one.
This very prominent meeting with Jim Brown and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Bill Russell and Muhammad Ali, just to see all of them in the same space and not be dealing exclusively with athletics, to be dealing with politics. I think we have to look at that as a sign of the times. I think there were black people throughout society who were no longer going to accept the treatment that they had been receiving. But I think the fact that you have these top athletes of their time coming together to take a stand on a racial and political issue is really unprecedented.
By 1966, after 16 years of coaching, an aging Auerbach began the search for his replacement.
We came into that year, and I was mulling over what to do. And finally, we're in the playoffs. And Russell came up to my room. He says, at this stage of my life, he says, I'd appreciate not playing for another coach. He says, can I coach the team? Well, I said to myself, who could better motivate Bill Russell than Bill Russell?
I had to ask myself, first of all, did I think I could do a good job? Would I be the best man for the job? And then, did I want all the aggravation I've seen Reid go through for the last 10 years?
Before Bill Russell was elected coach, there were no African-American coaches in football, baseball, anywhere. So we felt that this was an opportunity that was opening up for not only for Bill Russell, but for everybody. I mean, he was almost like the Jackie Robinson of coaching.
I don't think Reid was thinking about, well, I'll be known as the guy who hired the first black coach. He was thinking, what's best for the team.
However, during Russell's first year as player-coach, the Celtics' win streak would come to an end when Boston faced Philadelphia in the Eastern Conference Finals.
Philadelphia had one of the all-time great teams that year. They were physically imposing. I think Chamberlain finally had a team around him that really complimented him.
Chet Walker. Beautiful maneuvering by Walker for that shot.
We were good. You know, we had won 68 games and we only lost 13. So we were a good team.
Hard to really imagine what must be going through a man like Bill Russell's mind. For years, he's been the hub of this successful team, his first year as a coach, and now he stands 1 minute away from his team being ousted from the playoffs.
For the black players on the 76ers, their triumph over Boston, at last, was made bittersweet by the fact that they had defeated the first black coach in NBA history.
So it was kind of a joyous moment, but we felt good about the fact that we won, but we were kind of sad that we had to beat Bill Russell.
I can remember when they beat us in Philadelphia in the convention hall. They said, the Celtics are dead, the Celtics are dead, the Celtics are finally dead. And I said, we're only dead until next September when the season starts again.
We've got some difficult days ahead. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. But it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop. I don't mind the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land.
NBC interrupts its regular program schedule to bring you the following special report.
Martin Luther King Jr. was killed tonight in Memphis, Tennessee, shot in the face as he stood alone on the balcony of his hotel room.
The 68 playoffs were a disappointment in many ways. Russell was still the coach, and we met the Celtics in the Eastern Finals. And then Martin Luther King was shot and assassinated. Both teams went to the same locker room to decide if we were going to play this game or not. And it was a real intense meeting. And eventually, it was decided that we would play.
In an extraordinary comeback, down 3 games to 1, the Celtics won the series in Philadelphia in the 7th game, on the heels of what was a tumultuous time. They then moved on to beat Los Angeles. Bill Russell, the first black coach in the NBA, had now become the first black coach to win a championship. Russell struggled with injuries the following season, but in true Celtic fashion, they battled their way through to Game 7 of the finals against the Lakers. For Russell, it was to be his most significant game. A win was crucial.
I knew before the season started it was going to be my last year, but I didn't tell anyone, because throughout my career, I was always very careful not to say things that would change my teammates' psyche or vision or anything.
But Game 7 at home gave the Lakers owner Jack Kent Cooke reason to celebrate, albeit a little too early.
I saw the owner of the Lakers coming down the stairs early before anybody had come in the gym along with the commissioner. And Jack in his heavy voice says, "Sam, I want to give you one of these sheets." It says, when the Lakers win the championship, the USC band would play Happy Days Are Here Again. And they had these seats behind the baskets where the USC band would sit. And the balloons would come out of the rafters, and there must have been thousands of balloons, which I had never seen. I didn't look up. And Chick Hearns would interview Elgin Baylor, Jerry West, and Wilt Chamberlain in order. So I took this sheet back to Bill Russell. I said, "Russell, I'd like for you to see this sheet, and I want you to read it."
First reaction was to laugh, you know. And I said, "Look at this, and guys, this is what I know. There's not a remote possibility or chance for the Lakers to win this game."
But then he says, we're going to change our game plan. We're going to run. We're going to run them into the floor.
And it was a bizarre game because the Celtics take a big lead, and then Chamberlain gets hurt.
5:55 to go, and Chamberlain hurt his leg on the play.
And takes himself out of the game. And everybody is thinking, how can he do this in the 7th game? But he says he's hurt. And Butch Van Bredikoff, the coach, sends in Mel Counts to take his place. And sure enough, the Lakers start chipping away.
Well, during the 4th quarter, I fouled out. And I knew that we had built up enough points that I thought we could win it. But then about the last 3 minutes, they started making a comeback that you could not believe. They were scoring on every possession. We were missing.
Now in Bryant. Short. Rebound. And Jerry West. 5 points now. And the Lakers come back. 40 points for Jerry West.
Chamberlain comes down the bench to Von Bredikoff and says, "I'm ready to go back in the game." Von Bredikoff says no. And it's amazing. Jack Kent Cooke now appears behind Von Bredikoff and says, "Send him into the game." And Von Bredikoff turns around and delivers a very pithy epithet at his boss. And he keeps Chamberlain out of the game. And right near the end, in one of it's the most extraordinary shot I've ever seen. The ball gets tipped out of Havlicek's hand. It ends up in Don Nelson's hand like this. The clock is running down. He shoots it. It hits the back rim and goes straight up in the air, like a waterfall, like a water spout.
Goes past the backboard, straight up in the air, and comes straight back down.
Now it's Havlicek. Knocked away, but Nelson gets it.
That was a shot that really cinched the NBA Finals for us.
At this point, I honestly believe they must have thought, God wears a green uniform. They couldn't have thought anything else. And staggering, but hanging on, the Celtics win, and it's Russell's finale.
And time has run out, and the Boston Celtics have done it again. Another jewel in that crown. And there you see Don Nelson. Here comes Bailey Howell. Now Tom Sanders. 108 to 106. Here is Jack.
Chris, I'm here with Bill Russell. Bill, this must have been a great win for you.
Exactly.
I know it's hard to say what's in your mind right now, Bill, and it must have been a great win.
Boy, this is such a great bunch of guys, you know, and it's just been so fabulous the way they played for me. And it sounds all corny, you know, start talking like that, but I told these guys before the game, I don't care what happens, I wouldn't trade you guys for any guys in the world.
Russell left basketball as he entered it, a champion. The Celtics had their 11th title in 13 seasons, a record unmatched in any sport. Bill Russell's contributions to the game and to life resonate to this day.
I'm sure all great ball players want to win, but I'm not sure that all great ball players sacrifice themselves to win, and I think Russell did.
He was the heart and soul of the Celtic team, and he played the game the way you like to see people play it, with a passion every night.
He just brought all of his intelligence to the basketball court. And not only was he extremely competitive as a player, but he outthought many of his opponents.
He was a role model by what he was, and other people say, hey, this is a new way of looking at a black person. I want to be like him.
He was going to risk everything to be his own person and to deal with what would be right. And at the time, what was right for white America wasn't right for black America. So Bill was an individual that wanted things to be right for everybody.
Russell did it on the basketball court, and more importantly, as a black man, he stood up and said, you're not going to reduce me to an entertainer. I'm gonna play basketball and I'm gonna be a man, and you're gonna respect me for this. At the end of the day, any black man, particularly at that time, to stand up and make those sort of statements with his play and with his words, for me, will eminently be significant.
I have 11 rings, but I have infinitely more friends that I acquired on the journey to get to rings. And that is the most important thing.
This has been a presentation of HBO Sports, the network of champions.